Hey there folks, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could be here because in today's episode, we're going to be using our Stay Fresh freeze dryer to make freeze-dried Tootsie Rolls. That's right, if you're into freeze-dried candy, you're not going to want to skip a single second of this video because Tootsie Rolls can be a little tricky. If not done correctly, they turn into these hard, dense crackers that's just not very pleasant at all. What I'm going to show you is how to turn this chewy, chocolate-esque candy into a airy, crispy, crunchy delight. It's going to be amazing. Let's get started.
Let's freeze-dry the Tootsie Roll. These are mini Tootsie Rolls, and I found a big old pack online. And I'm going to tell you, the most laborious part of this entire process is unwrapping them. The rest of the process is relatively easy. One thing you don't want to do is unwrap a bunch of them and set them in a bowl because they will stick together. And although I initially put them on the tray as whole pieces, I did think it was going to be better to cut them in half. And remember, at this point, all we've done was unwrap the Tootsie Roll, cut it in half, and set it in our tray. There is a piece of parchment paper to keep the Tootsie Roll from sticking to the tray during the freeze-drying process.
Here's where things get tricky. We've got our Tootsie Rolls. They're cut in half. You don't have to cut them in half. You can leave them whole. They're going to be huge if you do. You can cut them into thirds if you want. It's irrelevant. They're ready to go into the freeze dryer. And the number one tip that I can give you at this stage, if you want to successfully make Tootsie Rolls, is that they need to be softened before the freeze drying process begins. So what we're going to do is we're going to warm the trays in the freeze dryer. I'm going to show you how to do that and then run the entire process manually. Let's go over to the freeze dryer.
All right, so this is the first screen you look at when you turn on your freeze dryer, and in order to preheat your trays, you have to click the Functions option. The first thing we have to do is turn on the compressor, so we're going to click the compressor button, and now it's on. And I want you to notice the temperature. Notice it says 65 Fahrenheit. Before we move on to heating the trays, we want the trap temperature to be at -20, and that normally takes anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes. All right, we're back. 11 minutes have passed, and notice that our trap temperature is at -25, which is great because we only need it to be at -20. The next thing we need to do is turn on the shelf heaters. In order to do that, we need to actually set the target shelf temperature, and that's what TS stands for. So that little button next to TS, we're going to click it and type in the temperature we want it to be at. 150 is the max. That's in Fahrenheit. So once you have the target temperature set, there's a couple ways to activate the heater. The first way is to press that heater off button to turn the heater on. Once you do that, your shelf temperature will get to your target temperature pretty quick. The only problem here is that once your shelf temperature gets to your target temperature, that heater will automatically cut off. And that's primarily because it's used as a function test. And so I'm going to show you the second way to do it, and that's to press the TS button. The TS button will turn on the heater as well, and it will get to your target temperature and maintain that target temperature. The only problem here is that it's not as quick as if you were to do it the first way. So here's what I like to do. I like to activate that top button first, which gets my shelf temperature to my target temperature pretty quick. And then once we get pretty close, I'll just hit the TS button so that the heater will stay on and just keep it at whatever I set it at. I think the whole thing took about 10 minutes. I like to stick the candy in while the trays are preheating, and our Tootsie Rolls are already fairly soft, so this should soften them even more. We're going to double lock the door. We also need to make sure that the fresh air valve is closed. There we go. And then, of course, check your drain valve. Make sure that's closed as well. Excellent. Okay, 10 minutes have passed, and the shelf temperature is now 147. We're super close to our target. If I don't do anything, the heater will automatically turn off once we get to our target temperature. And I don't want that to happen. And so right here, what I do is I just come on down to that TS button, I press it, and there we go. And now the shelf will stay at 150 until I deactivate it. And the reason I like doing this is because it happens pretty quick. But like I said in the beginning, you can start off by pressing TS, and it will get you to your target shelf temperature. It's just going to take a little bit longer. And so it just really comes down to how much time you have to check on the machine, press the buttons when you need to move on to the next step, because 100% of this is manual. You have to physically do it. Take a look at where it says 0 minutes where my finger is. This little box lets you know how long your trays have been preheating. So when it says 1 minute, it just means that your trays have been heating at 150 degrees for 1 minute. Let's take a look at our candy so that you can see what that looks like. And remember, I put my candy in at the beginning of the preheating cycle, and so these are going to have a really great chance to soften up nicely. We're going to let these preheat for 19 to 20 minutes, and when we look at our screen, 19 minutes have now passed. That's just literally telling us that your trays have been at 150 degrees for 19 minutes. Remember, this is a manual process, so each step has to be activated manually. Let's look at our Tootsie Rolls. 19 minutes later, they are very soft. They've almost turned into little discs, which is exactly what you want when it comes to Tootsie Rolls. All right, so it's now time to move on to the next step. One thing that I do want to add right here is that it's advisable to not preheat your trays for more than 20 minutes. For most candies, it's not going to be an issue, but Tootsie Rolls do tend to benefit from these longer preheat times because they really puff up well when they're nice and soft. All right, so we're at that 20-minute mark. Let's turn on the pump. That's the next step. Now that the pump is on, let's open the motorized ball valve. And there you go. Everything that needs to be on is now on. What you've basically done is run candy mode, but in a manual format. And that's allowed you to preheat the shelf temperatures, which some candies benefit from that. Let me show you what our Tootsie Rolls look like real quick. As the vacuum pump kicks on, the softened candy is going to start to expand, and that's what's going to give your Tootsie Rolls that completely different texture, that crispy, airy texture that freeze-dried candy is known for. Those look absolutely amazing. This is the end of our process. Notice we've been running for 218 minutes. Let's take a look at our Tootsie Rolls as they're finished. This is the end result of our Tootsie Rolls being preheated for 20 minutes inside of our Stay Fresh freeze dryer. Absolutely beautiful. They're going to be nice and crispy and airy. Okay, let's turn everything off. The absolute best way to do this so you don't damage your freeze dryer is to deactivate everything in the reverse order. Okay, so the very first thing we need to deactivate is the valve. There we go. The next thing we need to deactivate is the pump, right? We're working in reverse at this point. Next, we need to deactivate the shelf heater. So we click the TS. Now that's off. And then finally, we need to deactivate the compressor. And that's the most appropriate way to turn all of these functions off so that you don't cause any damage to your freeze dryer or its components. Now that everything's off, let's open the air valve to break the vacuum. And just so you know that there are certain candies that benefit from cooling down a bit before you release the air inside your freeze dryer, things like gummy worms, peach rings, gummy bears. Those you're going to want to let cool a bit before you release the air valve. But for Tootsie Rolls, it doesn't really matter too much. All right, the process is complete. These were in the freeze dryer for a little under 4 hours. Realistically, for Tootsie Rolls, 2.5 hours to 3 hours is sufficient, especially if you preheat them and they're nice and soft before the process begins.
And I gotta tell you, these freeze-dried beautifully. I mean, check this out. Beautiful glossy finish, puffed up nicely right there. Very airy, and that's exactly what you're looking for. And like I said earlier, the best way to achieve this is to make sure that your Tootsie Roll is relatively soft before the freeze drying process begins. From what I've learned when it comes to freeze drying candy, everyone's results are going to be slightly different. It really all comes down to the temperature and the humidity that your freeze dryer is in, because that affects how it works. Also, what's the temperature of your candy when you put it into the freeze dryer? For me, I'm working in a relatively hot room right now. This room is probably 85 degrees, and so my candy was already pretty soft when it went into the freeze dryer, and so that warming period softened them up even more. However you decide to do it, just make sure that your Tootsie Rolls are nice and soft. You're going to get an awesome result. All right, let's give it a taste and see how it turned out. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've never been a huge Tootsie Roll fan. I don't know if it's the texture, the flavor, whatever it is. And this is definitely still very much a Tootsie Roll for me. The flavor is slightly enhanced. I think it's more concentrated. The texture is clearly different. It's airy, crispy, it melts in your mouth. And so it is a neat way to enjoy Tootsie Rolls if you like Tootsie Rolls. If you don't like Tootsie Rolls, I don't think this is going to change your mind. To me, it almost kind of reminds me of what a cereal might look like if Tootsie Rolls got into the cereal game, right? Wouldn't that be wild? Anyway, if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And for those of you that are into freeze drying, we just started a brand new Stay Fresh freeze drying group on Facebook. So if you have a Stay Fresh, or if you're considering getting a Stay Fresh, I'm going to put a link to that group in the description box below. Be sure to join. We cover tips and tricks. We kind of really go into the details of how to use this machine and get the most out of it. If you want more information on the Stay Fresh freeze dryer, I'll put a link to their website in the description box below. Don't forget to use the coupon code 2GUYS to save a couple bucks off your purchase. Thanks a lot for watching today's video. If you enjoyed today's content, hit that thumbs up button, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. A lot more great stuff on the horizon. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. I'm not sure about it. I don't know.